I wanted to play with gouache again, since it's been a while. The original plan was to use the new Meaden hot-pressed cotton watercolor paper I received over the holidays. But then I remembered the fun-sized Talens sketchbook that Sarah Bailey had sent me, the one with 80 sheets of 94-pound sketch paper. And I thought, what the heck? Let's break that puppy in. Because if there's one thing this studio is known for, it's heckin' around. Hi, I'm Irene. This is Inkworks, and today we're using a wet medium on non-wet media paper. Will the sketchbook hold up under gouache, or will it melt like that Nazi's face in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Well, you'll just have to wait until the end of the video to find out. Actually, no, you won't, because my shoulders can barely keep a purse strap in place. They wouldn't last under the weight of secrets, too. So I'll tell you right now, outside of some warping, which was expected, the paper held up okay. But going forward, when using gouache in this sketchbook, I plan to glue alternating pages together. To provide more stiffness, yes, but also to prevent soaking the previous pages and possibly reactivating the paint there. Is that overkill? Perhaps, but in this situation, I'd rather be safe than sorry. Creating a border was easy peasy using a stencil. It's from a set of 36 flexible plastic stencils intended for journaling. It was only $10, and since my journal activity is pretty haphazard, applying them to arting purposes made sense. For the sketch, I used a Derwent drawing pencil in the color Mars Violet, because I'd already chosen crimson and antique gold as my gouache colors. They're from the Winter Iridori set by Holbein, plus my big tube of permanent white, so I could lighten the crimson to shades of pink. I was wondering what I could say on the topic of pink. Honestly, I haven't got a lot. I mean, does anyone really want to hear about the ratty pink robe I've been using for the past 20 years? The one that's now covered with lint pills and odd bare spots? I don't think so. So I'll chat about random stuff. Like how I'm having a mug of tea rather than coffee. I boiled the water and steeped the tea bag, then momentarily forgot it was tea I was dealing with and mixed in 2 heaping spoonfuls of powdered creamer. Now, without the robust coffee element, I'm drinking basically hot liquid creamer. What a disappointing start to the day, I tell you. The lemon poppy seed muffin I'm nibbling on kinda makes up for it, though. Yeah, maybe. Speaking of poppy seed, for a long time I figured that was what was in Hobbit seed cake. But I've recently learned that traditional English seed cakes use caraway seeds. That's difficult to wrap my head around because I associate caraway seeds with bread, and I would definitely put meat and cheese on bread, making it more of a midday meal rather than a tea and cake thing. It's been a while since I read Tolkien's books, but for some reason I picture Bilbo's Bag End Pantry having at least a few seed cakes at all times. Didn't he easily whip them out when the dwarves came calling? That's right. Nothing's cozier than a hobbit home, and cozy mysteries are my jam. Has anyone written something like Crimes of Middle-earth, the Shire edition? Stories could include The Case of the Missing Seed Cakes, Fear Comes to Frogmorton, and When Gardeners Go Bad. I used several brushes from Princeton's Select series, a number 10 flat shader, a number 4 filbert, and a number 2 round. While adding the final details, I did wish I had a smaller round brush. I mean, I could have used one of my Neptune or Aqua Elite small rounds, but I tried to keep those brushes for watercolors only. Because gouache really gets down into the bristles, and cleaning it out takes some effort, which means the bristles get abused. So having brushes dedicated to gouache just makes sense to me. I was recently recommended the crime mystery series Castle. For some background, I've enjoyed similar shows such as Psych and Midsummer Murders. I've just viewed the first 2 episodes of Castle, and I can take or leave the show. It didn't completely grab me, but the premise is interesting, and there appears to be chemistry between the characters. What say you? Thumbs up, thumbs down, off with its head? Now is a good time to talk about the tactile experience with gouache because it differs from watercolors. With watercolors, you're mostly dealing with the weight and viscosity of water, but with gouache, the paint itself is quite thick. While you can thin it with water, you will often use it as is or only slightly thinned. I believe that makes for a more tactile experience, similar to how it feels working with acrylics or oils. So, although I often say watercolors are the most magical medium, there's actually a lot to be said for gouache. But I don't want to keep repeating myself. So, see that little white spot near the back of the neck, between the hair and the collar? I kept painting around it to preserve that little niche of negative space, but eventually I couldn't deal with it anymore and just painted over it, because life's too short, man. I still use slang from my Gen X childhood and teen years, man being one of them. Cool and dude are 2 more. It's kind of interesting to see which words get adopted by the next generation and which don't. The other day, I watched a YouTube video where 2 20-somethings said dude a couple of dozen times. Granted, I expect they were high the whole time, and the video was over an hour long. But throughout, I didn't hear a single gnarly or tubular. I think my point's been made. This design might appear to be inspired by Valentine's or other romance-related subjects, mostly due to the red and pink colors. But I wasn't thinking about any of those things. I just wanted to paint something simple and not too challenging. Yeah, it was one of those days. However, in hindsight, the completed piece does remind me of cotton candy, Nestle's Strawberry Quick, and chocolate-covered cherries. That's what happens when I write these voiceovers while I'm peckish. That poppy seed muffin earlier barely hit the bottom. But back to my tangent. Early in our relationship, I made it clear to producer Mike that only Cella chocolate cherries would do, and to completely forget about the Queen Anne brand. Sure, I'm skating into dangerous food fight territory, but it's not like I've never played keyboard warrior before. And after the recent hullabaloo about a pizza place hating on my beloved pineapple topping, well, I'm in one of my rare come-at-me moods. So here it is. Cella rocks, Queen Anne eats socks. Cella's cordials have a delightful liquid center. Queen Anne's have a thick, grainy gunkus. Producer Mike immediately grasped the importance of that preference and has never once strayed from Cella. Whether it's for birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, or any days, really. I call that sort of care and consideration the sticky, sugary mass that holds a couple together. Producer Mike calls it self-preservation. Tomato, tomato. Earlier, I mentioned wishing I had a smaller brush for the final detail work. That's because the number 2 round was giving pretty thick marks, so much so that I had to go back in and erase a few spots. Erase. I meant cover up. That's actually the biggest advantage of gouache. Its opacity. Sure, you give up the delicate beauty of transparency, but you gain the superpower of correcting mistakes. Silhouette portraits are an old-fashioned art form that was common from roughly the mid-1700s until the mid-1800s. It was less popular once photography became big from the mid-1800s onwards. The craft isn't completely lost, though, as people continue to find silhouette portraits charmingly vintage. In fact, the Disneyland Resort operates a dedicated silhouette studio right on Main Street. I believe you can get your personal portrait for around $15. It goes up from there if you want it framed. Also, if you go to the back of Disneyland's New Orleans Square, you can get a personalized caricature drawing starting at around $25. I should emphasize, these are real people creating the art, not robots or AI. Not yet, anyway. Pencils and pens would be perfect matches for this Talens sketchbook. Ideally, I'd want heavier paper for gouache. Like I mentioned earlier, it did buckle a bit, but this is a sketchbook after all, not a finished painting to display on a wall book. And as such, it's quite serviceable. In addition to being cute and compact. Did I mention that? Yeah, it's only 4.5 inches squared. Wait a minute. That means all this time you thought my hands were just enormous? Not sure if I feel insulted or complimented. I'm happy to share this arting session. I pushed the limits of this paper by attacking it with a wet medium because I just had to know. Was it unfair? Perhaps. Will I do it again? Of course. A little warping doesn't put me off. Just like knowing it's supposed to be caraway seeds isn't going to stop me from thinking myself very hobbity while snarfing a poppy seed muffin. Hey, it's not like they were adding non-dairy creamer to their tea either. Just saying. Until next time, remember, Totally Rad is out. Whoa, dude is in. And stay artsy, my friends.